Family, thank you so much for tuning in with your favorite Pastor Ty here. And guess what? We're so excited because there is a word here today, the scandal of grace. Could you imagine that sometimes grace can even be scandalous? I'm telling you, God has a word for you. So I will see you at the end of this video. Peace. I love you.
2 Corinthians chapter 12, beginning at verse 7. You've heard this verse before. You've known it before. I believe it's fitting as of what has gone forth today. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. When you find it, signify by saying amen. Paul writes here from the Christian Standard Bible, especially because of the extraordinary revelations. Therefore, so that I would not exalt myself, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to torment me so that I would not exalt myself. Concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will most gladly boast all the more about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may reside in me. So I take pleasure in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and in difficulties for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Can you give my sermon subject to somebody and say, neighbor, there's scandal when it comes to grace. That you may be seated. There's scandal, the scandal of grace. It comes around every year. Little boys and little girls begin to prepare for it on January 1, because the record is that he's making a list and checking it twice. He's going to find out who's naughty and nice. Santa Claus is coming to town. Well, unfortunately, in the house that I grew up in, and I pray no children are listening to me at this time, I never got the luxury of believing in old Saint Nick. My mother never allowed us to fall prey to the myth that a pot-bellied Caucasian man who traveled from the North Pole on a sled led by reindeer would stop by each house by way of a chimney and deliver gifts to little boys and to little girls. Well, for one, the house that I grew up in didn't have a chimney, but also my mother was a stay-at-home mom and always wanted my brothers and I to be aware that our father was the one who provided for us. We were always aware that it was our father, it was our daddy who brought us gifts for us on Christmas Day. See, growing up, we always saw daddy as a provider. You see, with one hand, daddy provided gifts. And as I got older, he also didn't have much problem telling us that we were living in his house, under his roof, eating from his refrigerator, soaking up his air. I want us to be clear, everything that we had belonged to him. But you know, growing up as children can be difficult, can't it? Because while growing up, you and I are faced with the issue that plagues and baffles so many young, immature minds. You see, my mother had a way of whenever we did something wrong, if it was really bad, she wouldn't get us herself. She would always remark, I'm going to go tell your daddy. And hear me, church, my mama's not here, praise the Lord. Whippings from mama hurt, but whippings from daddy really hurt. I know that's almost foreign because some of y'all didn't grow up in houses where y'all got whippings, but I came from a house where we got whippings. You see, I was faced with this reality of trying to understand how in the world that the same man who was responsible for providing me with gifts that I always wanted, was also the same man that was responsible for providing me with the discipline that I rejected. You see, the very same man did both. He didn't undergo some transformation. Neither did he suffer from bipolar disorder as far as I know. But the very same man did both. It was as if that one hand he provided gifts, and on the other hand he would discipline us. Hear me, church. As a child, I struggled with the notion of a two-handed daddy. It's almost fitting and appropriate when we come to our present text that we're faced with this predicament, that when we come to this text, that the same issue that adolescent Ty struggled with, you and I struggle with as well. We love this book of 2 Corinthians, for it's one of the homes of those hallmark scriptures of the faith that says, but we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of power may be of God and not of us, that we are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, cast down, but not destroyed. How we love this reality that God places treasure on the inside of us. We love this fact that God places invaluable things on the inside of each and every one of us, and we come to church and shout off of this reality, and I'm with it. But brothers and sisters, that is only one hand of the Father. There is another hand that is another extension that we find in chapter 12, because the same God that provides treasure in chapter 4 turns around and provides a thorn in chapter 12. Can I try that one more time? The same God that gives treasure in chapter 4 is also responsible for providing a thorn in chapter 12. And I got a problem with that, because the humorous thing is that both the thorn and treasure are both signs of grace. I got a problem with the reality that both thorn and treasure is an extension of the grace of God, and we are comfortable with a grace that provides us with things that we like. And I hear the language of the church all the time that we have developed an affinity for this word called favor, and I would have you to know that the same word for grace is the same word for favor in the New Testament. It was treasure, favor, that saw crippled Mephibosheth in 2 Samuel chapter 9 and brought him from Lodabar to Jerusalem and gave him back everything that belonged to his father and grandfather, because that was a treasure favor. It was a treasure favor that went to Jesse's house in search of the next king of Israel, and didn't choose any of the boys in the living room, but wanted the forgotten boy who was keeping the sheep and selected him to be the next king of Israel. That's treasure favor. It was treasure favor that picked Moses from the infested Nile River, brought him up to Pharaoh's house, ran him out because he was a murderer, but then brought him back because he was a liberator. We love favor because favor provides credit for houses that we don't qualify for, promotions that we aren't fit to have, cars that we don't have money to drive. But aren't you aware that the very same favor and grace that gives you the car and the house and the job and the boo can turn around and place aggravation and agitation in your life? I don't know who I may be talking to, but I came to tell somebody here today that perhaps what you may be facing right now, although it's irritating, it could be grace. Perhaps although it may be aggravating, it can still be grace. And I came today, I didn't come to talk to the children Christians today. I didn't come today to talk to the teenage Christians today. I came to talk to the grown-ups today. I came to talk to the people that have walked with God for a little while. I came to talk to the people today that say, hey, Rev, it ain't always been good in my life. Things ain't always turned out the way I expected it to be. And things ain't always going the way I thought they should go. And I gave my life to Jesus. And I came to tell you that it could be you on the right track, but sometimes treasure and grace from God comes in the sign of a thorn. And I got a question, First Institutional. Are you willing to grip both hands of the grace of God? Yeah, are you willing to grip both hands of the grace of God? And I only want to suggest one thing. If you don't hear anything else I say, You can grip both hands of the grace of grace of God with the same joy. With the same joy. I want to show you. I want to show you because you don't believe me. You can grip both hands because of who God is. Look at verse 7. If it's still in your Bible is still open. So to keep me from becoming conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelation, a thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. Paul states that it was a thorn that was given to him. He says it was a thorn that was given almost as if it was a present to him. This word here, thorn, preachers, in the Greek is only used one time in the New Testament. But it has a connotation, a wide range of meaning, but because the word thorn carries a light connotation in today's time. But the reference here is pointing to a stake, which is a long pointed instrument that can literally pierce through something. And scholars debate as to what exactly this thorn possibly really was. We aren't sure what it was. That some suggest that it was some psychological ailment. Maybe Paul suffered from some personal anxiety or torment or depression or maybe even a sexual temptation. Or some suggest that the thorn were the Judaizers who were coming into Paul's church and then trying to discredit his ministry. Or maybe Paul suffered from a physical ailment like epilepsy or a speech impediment or even migraines. I know we don't really know what the thorn was for Paul. But family, sometimes God will intentionally leave things out because it's an invitation for you to place yourself into the text. Maybe the more appropriate question isn't what is Paul's thorn. The more appropriate question is, what is your thorn? What is your thorn? What is your thorn? And notice how Paul describes it. He describes it as a messenger of Satan to harass me. That word harass means to be punched and to be knocked around. And the tense of the verb, family, is in the present tense, which in Greek means it is continuous action. Paul wasn't just punched and kicked one time. No, it consistently punched and kicked him on the regular basis. He says it is a messenger of Satan. Satan plays a role in this whole situation. And we aren't exactly sure what it was, but we do know Satan was involved. But there was another definition of thorn that I left out. It means, it can also mean a surgical instrument. That hear what God is trying to communicate to Paul. God is trying to communicate to Paul. Paul is trying to communicate to us that God is so large that even God can use the plots and plans of Satan medicinally. You missed that. You missed that because you don't understand. You don't understand what this exactly means. A surgical instrument is used by a doctor in order to perform surgery. In other words, Paul, what you are going through has surgical implications. There are things that I'm trying to get out of you, Paul. There are things that I'm trying to rid you of, Paul. There are things that I'm trying to get you healthy for, Paul. And sometimes that's got to come through the avenue of a thorn. That reminds me of what happens in Genesis chapter 50. Old Joseph has been through a lot in his life. His brothers have betrayed him, put him in a pit, and then ultimately he gets to Egypt, interprets the right dreams, and ends up being second in command over Egypt. And then his brothers show back up, and they don't even recognize Joe because Joe looks better now. He's walking better. He's dressing better. He's got more money in the bank account now. And they say, wait a minute, Joseph, we are sorry for what you have done. And Joe said, don't even worry about it. You know why? Because what you meant for evil, my God was able to turn around and allow it to be made for my good. Sometimes God will allow the devil to work in your life because even the devil has to succumb to the plans of God. It reminds me, preachers, it reminds me of this old preacher, old scholar by the name of Martin Luther, the father of the Protestant Reformation. He says that Satan is God's devil. It's here is the scandal of grace. Here is the scandal of grace, that it can come from heaven, but hurt like hell. Yeah. Oh. But why? Why do I have to deal with Satan even in a medicinal factor? Why do I have to deal with Satan in such a way? Paul says, to keep me from becoming conceited. Yeah, you know what that means, because you work with people like that. You sit on the road with people like that. You got people like that in your contact to keep me from being puffed up and filled with pride. But wait. Paul says to keep me from becoming conceited. But why was he the potential of becoming conceited? The reason there's a potential of becoming conceited was because of the surpassing revelation between which him and God had gone through. In other words, there were things that Paul had pertaining to God that maybe other people didn't have. And Paul said, wait a minute, even though I had these grand revelations from God, it still did not allow for me to be able to come into FIBC and speak in tongues but not speak to my neighbor. It still did not allow for me to come in here and to lift up holy hands but then talk bad about the person I was sitting with on the row I was sitting on. It still didn't allow me, although I knew the Bible, to come in here and to spread rumors about people, and then when I find out that it wasn't the truth, go back and tell them, hey, I lied, it really didn't happen like that. He said, even though I got a relationship with God, it doesn't give me a pass to act any type of way. Could it be that the reason that some people are dealing with thorns is because of their intimacy with God? You got to be careful. Some things you're going to deal with is not because you're far away from God. It's because you're close to God. Reminds me, my homiletics professor, Dr. Joel Gregory, I remember on his 50th preaching anniversary, I was there in the crowd. He was preaching specifically about Peter, James, and John. He was talking about Jesus. And remember, he says, hey, Peter, James, and John are referred to as the inner circle of Jesus Christ. They got all the scoop. They know everything that is going on. And he said, think about this. He said, they knew everything. They were always welcome to come into the fold with Jesus. He said, and we in current Christianity and contemporary Christianity have lifted them up to a pedestal because God, Jesus, always brought them in closer than the others. But what if the reason why Jesus consistently brings them closer to him is because Jesus knew that if I don't bring them closer, I may lose them and never get them back? I'm trying to tell somebody here today, I don't know what I would be if God didn't burden me with the gift of preaching. I don't know what I would be if God didn't burden me with the gift of leadership. And some of you can be honest here today. If God hadn't changed your life, you would have been doing something way different than what you're doing now. But because God kept bringing you closer, some kind of way, God is getting the glory out of your life. Who am I talking to in FIBC or online today that can say, well, that is my testimony? And none of these people in here know it. If they really knew how I used to cuss people out, if they really knew what I used to be doing on the weekends, if they really knew where I was going late at night, if they really knew how I ain't always just drink Coke and Pepsi, if they really knew how I ain't always laid down with my husband and my wife, God has made a change in my life. God. Sometimes a divine tailored thorn is there because God knows that if I don't bring you closer to me, I may lose you forever. I may lose you. I may lose you forever. I remember a couple months ago, probably about a year or so ago now, my friend, Pastor Reginald Sharp, he pastors in Chicago, and Sharp called me because I was supposed to send him a sermon with some research that he was looking at from the late, great Manuel Scott. I also to send it to him, and I had forgotten. And he called me late one night in my room. He said, "Hey, bro, I'm trying to get that sermon that you were supposed to send me." I said, "Man, I forgot. I'm sorry." I said, "But let me try and do it right now." I got my computer, and I opened up my computer, and I found the sermon, and I tried to send it to Sharp. I was sending it to Sharp, and then I emailed it to him. I said, "Hey, man, did you get it?" Now, mind you, he's on a plane at the time. He's 10,000 feet in the air. He's 10,000, and mind you, he's texting me at the time. I said, "Did you get it?" He said, "Yeah, bro, I got it." He said, "But the voice is too faint. I can't hear what he's saying." I thought about that for a moment. I said, "Here it is. Sharp is elevated 10,000 feet in the air. And the reason why Sharp cannot hear the intended voice he's seeking to hear is because he's too high in the air. Because it's impossible to have high elevation and strong connection at the same time. And sometimes in order for Sharp to be able to hear the intended voice, he would have to lower his elevation to strengthen the connection to hear what he was supposed to hear. Let me stay there. I'll come get you. I missed this whole side of the church. Sometimes, family, God will bring you down because when you up there, you can't hear God the way you're supposed to. When you up there, you don't tithe the way you're supposed to. When you up there, people can't even speak to you. When you up there, people can't even look at you the wrong way. So God says, "All right, since that don't work, sometimes I'll bring a storm to bring you down so you can love your neighbor the right way, so you can learn how to speak to people, so you can learn how to give to people." Sometimes it's impossible to have high elevation and strong connection. And God said, "That's why I got to bring you down sometimes." God reserves the right to bring you down when the elevation is too high. You can grip both hands because of who God is, but then you can grip both hands because of what you have. Notice verses 8 and 9. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that I should leave, that it should leave me. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." I oftentimes wonder what that conversation must have been like. I wonder what it must have been like to be in the prayer closet with both Paul and the Lord. Can't you all see them? He just finished the last night of revival. And he's baffled the minds of scholars present and led some people to Christ in this particular meeting. But this thorn, when everything seems to be going right, it pokes its ugly head. And Paul has to hurry up and leave the revival meeting. Doesn't have time to greet and shake everybody's hands. The driver pulls up to the front of the hotel. And Paul exits the car and stumbles through those automatic doors, and look at him as it seems almost all the strength that he has to get to the elevator so that he could get to the 3rd floor. He hears that ding, which is almost like the gates of heaven are opening up, and which signifies he's reached the 3rd floor. He limps and presses through the hallway to get to his room, and opens the door, and the sheer weight of the thorn and the pain knocks him to his knees. But Paul lands on the edge of the bed, and knowing that he's on the edge of the bed, claps his hands together and say, "God, this hurts. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to deal with this. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep bearing what I'm going through. God, take it away." He sits there in meditation for a few more hours, hoping to hear even a whisper from God. "God, please take it away." He sits there, and God says nothing. Praise again. "God, take it away. I can't deal with this the way that I'm dealing with it. God, please hoping to hear something from God, and God says nothing. One more time, God, please. I don't know if I'll be able to handle it. God, please. And God says nothing. And then finally God speaks. Not the answer that Paul was looking for. Not the answer that you and I would want to hear when we're appealing to God to take away something. God says to Paul, no. Paul, I will not take it away. But why? Why, God? Why not? Why not take away the grief I'm dealing with? God, why not take away the pain that I'm experiencing? Because my grace is sufficient. You know, family, I got to be honest with you today that there's so many of us, that many of us are one no from God, from walking away from the faith. But I came to tell you today, if God ever tells you no, God doesn't tell you no and leave you empty-handed. God tells you no and then gives you what you need to deal with the no that God just gave you. He said, no, my grace is sufficient. Paul, no, my grace is enough for you to deal with this. You know what? The Gospels bear record of a man that went and prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. He prayed, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me, but nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. And you know what? I got to thinking about that for a minute. Paul sounds a lot like my Jesus. Paul sounds like Jesus. And I got to tell y'all something here. If Jesus prayed and got a no, and if Paul prayed and got to know, who in the world do you think you are to be able to think you're going to pray on the regular basis and always expect a yes from the Lord? This is Paul, family. Paul is the one that wrote Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for the good of them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. It's Paul, family. Paul, the one that said, and my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches and glory. It's Paul, the one that said, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. If Paul got a no from God, what do you think God's going to tell you sometimes? I got to tell somebody, those of you that possibly may be thinking about coming to join and be a part of our church, I want to tell you that just because you come down here and give the preacher your hand and give God your heart, I cannot guarantee you that you always going to get a yes from the Lord. I cannot guarantee you that you won't face some storms sometimes. I cannot guarantee you that God is always going to bring them out the hospital. I cannot guarantee you that you're going to always get the job you pray for. But I can guarantee you this, that anytime you get a no, you're going to get grace on the other side to be able to help you deal with it. Matter of fact, family, can we take about 5 or 10 seconds and give God praise? Because there have been times I've got no from God, but I had enough to deal with it. There have been times it ain't always gone my way, but it's been enough for me to deal with it. Yes, I'm done. Be seated. Be seated, be seated, be seated. I got a little more to go. That's right. He says no. God says no. He says no. My grace is sufficient. My grace is sufficient for you because my power is made perfect in weakness. I wish I could skip past this, but I can't, because notice the reply from the Lord is not, I will give you enough grace, but it is my grace. I'm happy. I'm happy, church. I'm happy. Ask me why. One of the things is I told the leaders here. I said one of the reasons I'm brilliant is because I know I'm not brilliant. Yeah. See, some of y'all want to act like you got all the answers. I know I don't have all the answers, and so because of that, if I don't know an answer, I'll go talk to people that I do know have the answer. I was at Chick-fil-A with a friend of mine by the name of Marcus Jerkins. Marcus Jerkins has a PhD in New Testament from Baylor, and Jenkins and I were studying Greek syntax and Greek and Greek in the Greek language, and he was helping me with learning about the construction of the Greek language, and we were reading through this particular passage. And when we were reading through, we got to with the part where it says my grace, and Marcus said, "Hold on, Ty, don't move past it." I said, "Wait, man." I said, "We're trying to get through the rest of the passage." He said, "No, don't stop, don't go past that." He says, "My grace." He said, "Ty, what you have to understand is in the Greek, that is something called a subjective genitive." I said, "English, please, Marcus. I don't know what that means." I stood there with my eyes open. He said, essentially, what God is telling Paul is that Jesus is telling Paul that it is my grace, not the grace of the Father, but the grace of the Son. The same grace that was needed to endure the cross at Calvary. I'm sitting there listening as he goes on. He says, suffering causes us to feel as if God is not present during suffering, but grace is the bridge that lets us know that God is always still there. Hear me. So that while God did not need grace, Jesus did need grace, because Jesus wraps himself in human flesh, and he needed grace to endure the suffering. And Jesus needed grace, friends. When they came to crucify him, he needed grace to endure. When Judas betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver, he needed grace. When Peter denied him, he needed grace. When they pressed the crown of thorns on his brow, he needed grace. When they spit on him, he needed grace. When they punched him, he needed grace. When they mocked him, he needed grace. When he died, he needed grace. And what Jesus is telling Paul is that the very same stuff that helped me get through Calvary is the very same stuff, Paul, that is on the inside of you to help you deal with your thorn. Why don't you nudge your neighbor and say, "Neighbor, the same stuff you trying to figure out how I ain't lost my mind after everything I've been through, that same grace. You trying to figure out why I'm still showing up in church after knowing what they said about me, that same grace. You trying to figure out why I still got money in my pocket and still driving the car I have and still living where I live. It's because I got the same grace that Jesus had to endure the cross at Calvary." Why don't you shout to your neighbor, "Same grace"? Same grace. Same grace. I'm done. Same grace. Same grace, Paul. And he says about that grace, it is sufficient. Oh. It is enough. Paul, if you got my grace, you don't need anything else. It's enough. It's enough. But he says, because my strength is made perfect in weakness. I got it. You know, this is one of these days. I got a mentor that says this. One of these days, we're going to learn how to shout off reading the Bible. I'm going to show you. It says, my strength is made perfect in weakness. I got you. I got you. The reason why you ain't moved is because you don't know what that word perfect means. You think that the word perfect means blemish free in Greek. But the word perfect in Greek actually means fully present. In other words, there's some strength from God that cannot be fully made present unless you're weak. In other words, grace ain't for strong folk. Grace ain't for folk that got it all together. Grace ain't for people that got everything going right in their life. Grace is seen in the weakness of people. Is there anybody in here that can say, yeah, that's my testimony? There have been times I didn't know what was going on, but the grace of God covered me. There were times I didn't know how I was going to make it, but God's grace does not rest on strong people. Because God's grace rests on the weak people. For the sake of Christ, then, I'm done. I'm content with my weaknesses. Last verse. Insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. Why? For when I am weak, then I'm strong. Yeah. Paul here, he letting everybody know. He letting the church at Corinth know. He said, hey, I'm all right with what I'm going through. That word content literally means to be happy. I'm happy with what I'm going to. But how are you happy, Paul? Paul says, I'm happy with the insults. Those are insults which leads to violence. I'm happy with the hardships. That means circumstances that cause bodily pain. I'm happy with the persecution. It's a word that means an animal is tracking one down like prey. I'm happy with the calamities. It refers to being in a tight corner with nowhere to go. Paul says, I'm happy in all of that because when I'm weak, I'm strong. Reminds me, a young man by the name of Corey Rimsberg, January 2014, State of the Union address. President Barack Obama had delivered his speech for about an hour, and at the end of that presentation, he made a young soldier by the name of Corey Rimsberg stand up that day. He met Corey on the 65th anniversary of D-Day, and Corey and Obama had a good time walking and talking and joking about pictures. Well, just 8 months before that, later, Corey would be nearly killed by a roadside grenade. It left him 3 months in a coma, and he had shrapnel in the brain, and he would lose sight in his right eye, and his left arm was paralyzed. But Corey was fighting back through rehab to make it back to his 11th deployment as a soldier. Corey lost his speech and had to go through hours of physical therapy, but the president said he just won't quit. He never gives up. But there's a pivotal scene. If you go and watch it on YouTube, at the end of the scene, there's a time that Corey is trying to stand to receive the applause from the people there. And Corey attempts to get up. And I noticed that when he wasn't able to stand up, there was a man beside Corey that wraps his arms around the waist of Corey and help Corey stand up so that he could receive the applause. I did some investigation and I found out that sitting next to Corey that particular day was his father that was sitting there, that when Corey could not stand on his own, his father wrapped his arms around the waist of his son and said, son, I know you've gone as far as you can, but that's okay. I got you, son. Let's get up a little bit higher. And I said, that reminds me of my Jesus. That reminds me of the God that I serve, because even when I'm weak, God has a way of making up the shortage. I'm still always strong. That's why the song says, amazing grace. I'm done. Shall always be my song of praise. For it was grace that brought me and purchased my liberty. I do not know how he came to love me so. He looked beyond my faults and he saw my needs. Goodbye, First Institutional. May God bless you real good. But this sermon today is only for the grace cases. This sermon today me is only for the folk that said the only reason I'm still here today is because of the grace of God. This sermon is only because of the grace of God. Will you help me preach to your neighbor and turn to a neighbor that ain't moved all service long and said, neighbor, can I give you my testimony in just one short word? Say, grace. Grace woke me up this morning. Grace started me on my way. Grace put food on the table. Grace brought me to church this morning. Grace made me be able to be here today. Grace is why I got the children I have. Grace is why I got the car I drive. Grace is what will carry you through everything you're going through. Bye-bye now, y'all. May God bless y'all real good. And I promise y'all I'm done after this. But grab that same neighbor one time. And I need you to grab that neighbor by the hand and say, neighbor, I got one more thing to tell you. That whatever you're going through, you've got enough to deal with the storm. You've got enough to deal with the pain. Because remember it says that my grace, it is sufficient. My grace, it is enough. I got one song and I'm done. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. It was grace that brought me safe thus far, and the grace is going to lead me home. Is there anybody in here that can lift up your hands and say, Lord, thank you for grace? Say, Lord, thank you for grace. We're standing all over the building. All over the building we're standing. It can come from heaven and it can hurt like hell. Just because it hurts doesn't mean that it's not from God. You know, here's the thing, here's the reality. I was growing up in church, we had this song, we were saying, everything that happened to me that was good, God did it. And that's true, that's true. But the counter to that is, everything that happened to me that was bad, God allowed it. Many of us today, our issue with God isn't what God did. Our issue is with what God allowed. God, how could you allow this to happen to me? And God says, I know it hurts. I know it's painful. But you got something to deal with it. Hear me, if God doesn't take it away, God gives us what we need to endure.
Sometimes grace is scandalous, and thank you so much for tuning in with us. Listen, we are embarking on a crazy journey. It's called Finish Strong, and I want you to be a part. I don't care if you're a member or you think about being a member, it doesn't matter. Finish strong with us. We are anticipating that God is going to do something amazing in 2026, but we got to begin right now. The link will be in our description. Sign up, please, ma'am, please, sir, and join in with us as we finish strong to prepare for what God has in store. I love you. Living purpose on purpose. See y'all next week.